Picture a boxing ring, aka hardware, which has software, aka a computer, inside of the boxing ring, aka the hardware. And the hardware and the software has something known as firmware, which is low-level code that starts up and controls the hardware safely. And you can think of this firmware as a boxer, and so the hardware and software and firmware combined work together to enforce a security policy. And the combination of all these three elements is known as a TCB, Trusted Computing Base. And it is the responsibility of these TCB components to ensure that a system behaves properly in all cases and that it adheres to the security policy under all circumstances. And to further clarify, the TCB is the only portion of the system that can be trusted to adhere and enforce the security policy. Important CISSP CCSP exam keynote. The TCB is essentially everything within this security perimeter, aka the border of the TCB. And this term security perimeter is important because it's in the CISSP and CCSP exam textbooks. And to further help, the security perimeter is a conceptual concept, and the TCB is everything inside this, the firmware, the hardware, the software that comes together to form the TCB. And the TCB is a conceptual concept that is the overall security and the most trusted part of the system with all these components working together. And here's another CISSP CCSP exam keynote. Everything outside of the TCB is non-security, aka untrusted elements of a system. And this leads us to our next abstract concept model known as the reference monitor. And the reference monitor is essentially the access control enforcer for the TCB, meaning it controls all the access requests from subjects or objects wanting to access the TCB. So to illustrate this concept, let's imagine a door inside the TCB, which is the reference monitor that monitors all the access requests. Now, access requests work off the subject and object model, where objects can be a file, folder, or device, aka the computer inside the ring. Now, I won't go into too much detail about what objects are, because I can cover that in a separate video. But for now, just know there are objects and there are also subjects. Now, subjects could be a user or a process. And generally, a subject will want to access an object. And if this object is inside a TCB, Trusted Computing Base, then the subject will have to go through the reference monitor, aka access control. Now, the reference monitor is an important term for your CISSP and CCSP exams, and essentially it is an access control enforcer, and there are different access models, the DAC, the MAC, the RBAC and the ABAC. But I won't go into detail in this video because we covered this in a separate gangster video, a literal gangster video that explains authorization models. And at this point I would like to say, if you're enjoying this video, please be sure to like and subscribe if not already to help support this new channel's growth. Now back to the TCB video. Now, an important technical note is that the reference monitor is a conceptual gatekeeper. That means we actually need a physical gatekeeper, something that will actually enforce the reference monitor's conceptual model. And inside the TCB, the elements that work together to implement the reference monitor functions is called the security kernel. And to illustrate the kernel, I have drawn a shell with an inner kernel. And the boxing glove represents the inner kernel within the shell. And essentially the kernel is what enforces the conceptual model into a practical model for the access control. So the green wave would actually come from the boxing glove rather than the conceptual door representing the reference monitor. Now, without going into too much detail about access controls, I do want to go over some terminologies, starting with a label. And you can think of a label as a classification tag that can be applied to either the subject or the object, or both. And it is usually permanent in that it defines a certain security level or clearance. And you'll commonly see this used in mandatory access controls, which you can learn more about in the video I referenced earlier about access controls. But for the purposes of this video, just know that labels can be applied to both the subject and the object, and that they are usually permanent. Now, on the other hand, there is another method known as tokens, which you can think of as temporary tickets that either last for the duration of a user's session, aka after login, and then expire after a set period of time or after the user presses the logout button. And tokens are commonly used in OAuth and SAML from a software perspective, but they can also be hardware such as multi-factor RSA fobs. Now, the next security concept I want to touch upon is a trusted pathway or trusted shell. Now the literature on this is quite sparse and it's quite a dry subject, but a very good tangible example that we use every single day as a trusted path on our own computers which may use Windows operating systems is the Windows Task Manager invoked through the keyboard shortcut of Ctrl Alt and A, and what this does is send a hardware signal directly to the TCB and the user can directly interact with the TCB, and this is known as a Secure Attention Key SAK, and no secondary or peripheral application or malware can trigger this because it's a very special hardware interrupt signal that forces the CPU and security kernel to take immediate control. So since the TCB trusted computer base is a conceptual model, you can think of this Ctrl Alt and Delete as a trusted path which is hardware invoked, and it complements access models but is another way for the user to directly invoke the TCB without having to go through the authentication, assuming they are already authenticated to the Windows operating system in order to use this combo key. And here's one last keynote: the TCB should ultimately be tamper-proof, aka it cannot be bypassed. I hope this explained the TCB trusted computer base because it's ultimately a very dry subject in both the CISSP and CCSP exams and is largely conceptual, and there is very sparse literature on this subject, hence I wanted to make this really cool video just to try to visualise some of this because I know I would have loved a video like this when I was studying for these exams. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the content. If so, please be sure to like and subscribe if not already to help support this new channel's growth. And if you have any ideas for future videos, please let me know down in the comments.